Welcome to the panel room. Today we're going to be talking about different genres out there and the importance of knowing what you're writing. As always, we'll go ahead and start out by going around the room and having everyone introduce themselves and some of the genres that they write in. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Gini.
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for dog books and a whole lot more. I write under 7 pen names and in every genre, which is why they tapped me for this panel.
All right, perfect. Gail.
I'll toss out the other pen names. I'll toss out the other pen names later.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Gail Z Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future post-apocalyptic, and steampunk. And then as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So yeah, fair amount of blending everything together and moving back and forth.
All right, perfect. And Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Sargeant. I write romance as Patricia Sargeant and as Regina Hart. I write romantic suspense, contemporary romance, historical romance, and sports romance and small town romance. And as Olivia Matthews, I write cozy mysteries and mainstream mysteries.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Do want to welcome Berta.
Hi, Berta.
Hi.
And if you could introduce yourselves, we just got to that part of it.
Oh, great.
So, yes, you're up.
I'm Berta Platas, and I write young adult fantasy as Jillian Summers with my writing partner, Michelle Roper, who is not here tonight. We have 11 books in our series, The Tree Shepherd's Daughter, and we're writing other things too. Right now, we're taking a break and writing our own stuff. And I also write women's fiction under my own name, Berta Platas.
All right, perfect. So the first question I've got, I'll start with you, Gail. What is it about the genres that you write in that appeals to you, and kind of define the genre as you see it, or genres, I should say, because so many of them.
The first genre I published in was epic fantasy, and that was very much by design. I'd always wanted to write sword and sorcery, magic. I absolutely loved things like Lord of the Rings and all the Mercedes Lackey stuff and so many other books like that. I majored in medieval history as an undergraduate because I knew someday I wanted to write these books. So this was very planned. It took a lot longer than I expected, but it was very planned. And right now I have 4 epic fantasy series, 2 of which are completed, 1 of which is almost completed, and another one that's ongoing. And next year I'll be kicking off a different one. I still love epic fantasy. I like the scope. I love the world building and the magic. Each of my series has a completely different magical system and a completely different religious system. And that's part of the fun for me. So mine are quasi-medieval, roughly late 1400s Western Europe technology level. And that is where my ancestry comes from. So that's the area that I studied in school and am most familiar with. And of course, none of it's based on our real world. So that's when I think of epic fantasy, as opposed to the slightly different high fantasy. The short answer is epic fantasy has swords, but no elves. High fantasy kind of has the elves and the dwarves going for it. So in that sense, Tolkien would be more high fantasy. I don't have elves and dwarves, but I do have vampires and werewolves. So go figure.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump to you, Berta. What about you?
Our YA fantasy series is urban fantasy, so it takes place in modern times. It's a real world girl who finds out that she's not human. And we had an opportunity to write a lot about women and empowering women, and also about being other, about feeling different and how to deal with it. And so we have this, this kid who thinks she's one thing and finds out she's something totally different, and how she deals with it. She finds out she's half elf and has to come to terms with that. And so we wanted to keep it light because we both deal with adversity with humor, and we like to do that. So these are kind of funny books. And unlike high fantasy, which can have humor, but usually it's pretty serious stuff. You know, it's like a quest and getting things done. These are, each novel delves a little bit deeper into the world and adds more to the magic. And it's a joy to write these books, really. A lot of fun.
Do you think young adult lends itself better to that feeling different that you focus on in the books?
That's what puberty is all about.
All right. So Patricia, what are your the things that appeal to you, I should say, about the genres you write?
In the romance genre, well, actually, I consider myself to be very character driven in my story building. So in the romance genre, what appeals to me is the character motivation of love. I believe that love is the most powerful motivation. And whether it's romantic love or it's love of your family or friend. In the mystery, I use friendship and family to motivate my amateur sleuths to solve the murder. And with mysteries, to be candid, mysteries and romantic suspense, I like creating the villain and embodying them with stuff that really annoys me in real life, and then just knocking them off the page. That's my motivation.
All right, perfect. Gini.
Okay, well, I originally, way back when, thought I was going to be known for epic fantasy and novels set in the Old West. And while I have that, novels set in the Old West and dystopian fiction with an Old West feel, writing as A.E. Stanton. And I have other fantasy and science fiction writing as Anita Ensall. What I ended up becoming known for is science fiction, because no matter how I try, 75% of what I write comes out science fiction. And as Gini Koch, it comes out funny. My Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series has a lot of action, romance, and humor in it. And it makes it very fun and makes it interesting to me. When I was writing it, of course, I thought I was writing paranormal romance, because I can see it on my aliens that they're basically as handsome as super and beautiful as supermodels, and also really brilliant and brainy, and they like earthlings, is as realistic to me as vampires and werewolves. But because they're science, it's science fiction. So I kept branching out in that, but it's hard to be funny all the time. As Gini Koch and G.J. Koch, where I write the Alexander Outland series, I have to be very funny. But as Anita Ensall or Gemma Chase, I can tackle the same kind of themes: space pirates, portals, vampires and werewolves, where I don't have to be funny about it. I can be a little whimsical, I can be a little gothy. Anita's more whimsical, Gemma's more gothy, but I don't have to be funny. And as J.C. Koch, I write horror, so I can kill things and laugh about it to myself, but I don't have to make the reader laugh after the monster wins. So I may be forgetting a pen name, and if so, I apologize to that section of myself, but that's why I write them. I write them because it's fun, and my voice changes, which is why I change my names. So because as Gini Koch, I'm expected to make you laugh. And if I don't feel like making you laugh, I can't write that story as Gini. I have to write it as somebody else. So that's part of the fun for me. If I had to do one voice forever, I'd have to pick Gini Koch, because that's my most successful pen name, but I don't want to have to be funny all the time. So that would be stifling to me. So I'm glad I don't have to.
All right, that kind of leads into the next question, and I'll start with you, Berta. Most of you, if not all of you, I believe, have multiple names that you write under. How important was that for you to be able to switch genres, or have you thought about doing multiple genres under the same name? Does that cause issues?
It does cause issues. Like Gini says, reader expectations are big. And if you write different things, there are some people who successfully write all kinds of different genres under the same name. And people just say, well, this person has like 10 split personalities. And so what are we going to pick up this time? Hope the cover artist keeps up with it. But for us, really, we decided, Michelle and I, to use Jillian Summers as our pen name because the books that I was writing, and I was already published in romance, were kind of steamy. And we were hoping 9-year-olds would not pick this up and get us banned from a library. So that was the issue there. And now I am writing a series, a fantasy series, and I struggled with that. I said, should I write it under my own name because this is an adult book? But my readers are expecting a happily ever after. You know, they want a different kind of book. So I'm not sure about it. I think I'll publish it under my own name and see what happens. And readers are really readers read everything, and there are very few readers that will just read one thing, one type of thing. So I have expectations for my readers.
Are you finding that your readers, the young adult, as they grow, are finding your other names, or?
Yeah, we weren't that smart. They found us.
All right. So Patricia, how about you?
You know, it's funny. When I first started, I was killing people in romantic suspense as Patricia Sargeant. And then allegedly, the bottom fell out of romantic suspense. So my publisher wanted to switch me over to contemporary romance. And I didn't want to use the Patricia Sargeant name with a story in which everybody lives at the end. So I took on Regina Hart. But I always wanted to get back to the dead bodies. So when I started writing mysteries, I wanted to use Patricia Sargeant. But the publisher did not want any connection to romance, so they wanted me to take a third name. And now I'm glad that they said that, because the algorithms, when I'm doing my online marketing, it keeps it a lot cleaner for the people who will read mysteries and not romance. Olivia Matthews is a cleaner way to go.
Perfect. Okay. Gini, I know you spoke about it a lot. Any additional comments?
Yeah, for me, and I know we've all basically said the same thing. I really think your name is your commitment to the reader. And I've had people complain when I had to write, but when I'm writing something as Gini Koch and it's not as funny as they expect it to be, I will actually see complaints. And it's just a reminder to me that I have to make sure that I write the story under the appropriate name. But I also find that for me, at least right now, I'm more successful if I can do Gini Koch writing as whoever, because my readers are very aware that I write under a variety of pen names, or at least the ones that are on my newsletter and active with me on social media, they're aware. But if they're not, when Alexander Outland's Space Pirate released, I got a fan letter from somebody distraught that someone was stealing both my name as GJ Koch and my writing style. And I had to explain, I mean, he was ready to like storm the castles for me. It was the sweetest thing. And I'm like, no, that's me. That's one of my pen names. He's like, why didn't they say so? And I'm like, the publisher made that decision. I thought they were wrong. and you just proved that they were, but okay. So I have publishers that were like, nope, no one of our readers knows who you are. And I'm like, yeah, but my readers do. And if you want them to show up here, which they will, maybe you should play by my rules. But, you know, the publishers get the say at the end of the day.
All right, Gail, how about you?
Well, since the same publisher that published my first and my most recent, my next to most recent epic fantasy series was also the one that asked me to write an urban fantasy series and also published our steampunk series, I don't think they were real worried about it. And now my backlist is with the big guys and we do everything indie, and so we only have to please our readers. The reason I went with the Morgan Bryce name is because in the Gail Z Martin books and the Gail and Larry books that I co-write with my husband, there's no explicit sex on page. Yes, you know, people are doing things, but it's one of those, you know, fade to black, pan to the candle sort of kind of thing. And Morgan Bryce is explicit on page sex, along with a lot of magic and action and all of that, but it is a romance and people get it on and we explain how. And so I didn't want anybody to accidentally get a heart attack by picking up a Morgan book and expecting it to be a Gail Heat level. And so it's never been a secret. And in fact, my urban fantasy series as Gail cross over with the urban fantasy series as Morgan. All the characters know each other. They show up in each other's books. They call on each other for help because hunting monsters is a fairly small world and everybody should know each other. And when it first happened, you know, I went to my regular readers and said, hey guys, I really want to do this other thing over here and it's under another name, but it's still me. So if you read this kind of stuff, come on over. And they went, oh, really? I love that stuff. And over they went. And then when I started to accumulate Morgan readers, I said, and by the way, guys, I also write this other stuff as Gail, and that's where some of these other characters come through. And they went, oh, I read that stuff too. And they went over. So now it's this wonderful mishmash of people who read both. And it makes it much more fun, and it's a lot easier for me because I don't have to keep as much stuff straight.
All right. So my next question, and I will start with you, Patricia. You kind of mentioned, you said you're character driven with your stories. Now, do you start with the story and then go, you know, or excuse me, with the idea and let it develop a bit and go, oh, that fits into this genre with this pen name? Or do you say, hey, I want to write something under this pen name in this genre and then come up with the idea?
I start with the character and what the character wants. And then based on what the character is after, I decide which world that character would best fit into. So if that character wants to find a corpse, then I put them with Olivia. And if that character just wants a happily ever after for everybody, then I put them with either Patricia or Regina. Good question, Jason.
Yeah. So Gini, same question.
I am an extreme linear writer. So I start with the title and the first line. And many times I do not know who the characters are until they let me know. That said, my stories are very character driven, but I don't necessarily know who the characters are until they show up on the page. Sometimes I do, and I'll build a story around them, but sometimes I just have this nebulous thought about who's filling this, and sometimes it's just, I like that title. I can write a story about that title, and boom, there I go. So I'm kind of all over the place. What I am not as an outliner, so I'm not going to be sitting there going, oh my goodness, gosh, and in chapter 5 this will happen, because I can only say that if I'm already writing chapter 6, and I can tell you what happened in chapter 5. But I've had some characters that wanted to cross over. I don't really allow it very much. I try to keep everybody's separate. I know if I had to where they fit, but I like having multiple universes. You got to figure someone writing under 6 or 7 names likes a lot of distinct variety.
So with, you were saying you don't know the character until they come out on the page. Do you know the pen name before then? Because you were saying,
that's a good question. Sometimes yes. I mean, if it's contracted and I know I have to write it as somebody, like if I'm writing horror, it's not going to be Gini Koch writing as JC Koch. But there are times, especially my Anita Ensall and Gemma Chase names like to overlap with Gini Koch a lot. So those 3 will like fight for who gets the story. And sometimes I can't tell. But my critique partner always knows. I will send it to her and she'll be like, I think you're cray. This is Gemma. Or yeah, that's so sweet that you think it's Gemma. That's Anita. She's really clear on who is who, sometimes much more clear than I am. So I have basically, and I have someone I'm mentoring and bringing up as like an additional crit partner. And she's learning how to say, we've got it. This is supposed to be Ginny. We got to get the Anita out of here and that kind of thing. So I have help. I'm not a really solitary writer. I have a lot of people that are involved in one way or the other. So, but yeah, that happens. Unfortunately, far more than I'd like.
All right, Gail. I know yours cross over a lot, but I'm assuming it's relatively easy to tell which story is going to be which name.
Yeah, I mean, no sex. Pretty easy.
But do you know if there's going to be sex when you first start writing it? That's I guess the main question.
Yes. Okay. And then there are the 2 series that I just told readers if they wanted to ship the main characters, they could. The sex and relationship was never going to be part of the plot in those 2 series. So ship them or not ship them. They can be best buddies or they can be lovers, up to you. I was never going to actually confirm that because it didn't matter to the kind of plot I was using in those. I'm kind of the opposite of what Ginny's been saying there, in that I couldn't keep all those universes straight in my head if they all had to be completely segmented and standalone. And I have a lot of fun having the characters show up in each other's books because in their own books, you get to see them from their point of view and maybe their lover's point of view. I tend to write a lot of established couples. When they show up in somebody else's book, now you've got a stranger seeing them, maybe for the first time. And so you get a completely different perspective on these characters you thought you knew. And that's a lot of fun. And fortunately, my readers tend to really like the crossover piece. And so that now they go looking for it, even when it's obscure or very low key, and they go, I found it. So it's a good thing, we all seem to be enjoying it.
You try to make the crossovers more frequent just for the fan service?
It's more that it fits. If you've got people hunting monsters in nowadays America, they're going to run across each other. They're going to know at least of each other, and they're probably going to team up from time to time. Somebody I've got a couple people who are really, really good. They used to be they're PhDs in folklore and mythology. They've got expertise when it comes to those kinds of things. I've got other people who are psychic mediums. And so you need to talk to a dead guy, you want to call Simon. So it's just natural for them to know each other and work together. And then it's a lot more fun too.
Okay. Berta, how about you?
I'm loving all these stories of how people write. This is the best thing ever. Well, of course, I know what name is going to go on my book. If it's a 14-year-old protagonist, it's going to be young adult. And for my my adult books, it's pretty clear. I only write under the one name right now, but I have thought to Patricia's point that, marketing is a huge thing. And if you're marketing your own books, if you're making Amazon ad buys or Facebook ads, and you want to be able to keep those metrics clean, yeah, that's a lot to consider there. So I will probably think of that with my upcoming series. But for young adult, it is pretty clear. And
All right.
likes those.
So my next question, start with you, Gina. Is it hard to mix genres, especially considering you seem to separate them out so much, with your different voices?
No, I don't think so. I think that honestly, genres exist for bookstores and libraries because that's how they know where to put you on the shelves. Everything I write has at least a strong subgenre. I have a lot of romance in everything I write. I don't actually write conventional romance. I've written one romantic suspense. I have trouble with the formulas that most people like. I don't have the skills Patricia has to get all those varieties of romance out there and satisfy those readers because they have very specific expectations, and I don't have that in me. Usually I have intricate plots. My first love was mysteries, so I feel like everything I write has a mystery in it. Whether or not you, the reader, realize there's a mystery in it, the characters are being forced to solve something along the way, and that's the mystery. To me, that's the framework. And then the overlay, what you see as the house, is the main genre. Is it science fiction? Is it paranormal? Is it space opera, fantasy, horror, dystopian, etc.? And then all the romance and the action and the humor or the not humor, whatever, the monsters, all of those things are, to me, what you're furnishing the house with. So I don't have a problem being cross-genre. I have much more of a problem being a single genre. If I have to write something that is wholly, boom, this one thing, I will have much more of a problem doing it. When for the Unidentified Funny Objects anthology series, I've been in since the third anthology, and so they want funny science fiction or fantasy, right? Well, even within that, I'm still adding. There's still like I'm tossing in some romance, or I'm tossing in action and these other things because I'm really not good at just like here this pure stream. I'm just not me. That's not me. So I think that's very difficult. I'm always super impressed by the people that can, because if the expectation for you is that very boom, you're very solid in this or these particular genres, and they're limited genres, and that the reader has very strong expectations, I'm just like, I'm so impressed because I can't do that. So
Gail?
Even my most solid epic fantasy still had people who were falling in love with each other, even if they didn't have on-page sex. And those pairings, those romances were very integral to the story, because you can't really talk kings and successions and interkingdom politics without it affecting who marries whom. And oh my gosh, those who just ran off together with each other, that's going to cause some problems, and those kinds of things. And so while I would say, those books were probably 95% action adventure and maybe 5% relationship, it was still significant to the plot throughout that whole series. And that's my Chronicles of the Necromancer series. And there's been something similar in all of them, except this newest series, Assassins of Landria, where I just said, okay, just not going to go there at all. You guys decide who's sleeping with whom. So I kind of agree that I've never done something that was just 100%, but people aren't 100%. Yeah, they're fighting a war, but you can't fight a war all the time. You got to come back and burn off, a little tension. And so I just look at my characters as real people and go, well, how would real people deal with this situation? And soldiers don't fight all the time.
So do you think mixing genres makes a story better?
See, in my mind, I'm not considering it mixing genres because to me, it's 95% epic fantasy. You'd never sell it as a romance. There's too much other stuff and no sex. So to me, it is solidly epic fantasy. It's just not myopically epic fantasy, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And it all depends on the story you're trying to tell. There are stories that you can tell, like in my Assassins of Landria series, where the relationships really don't factor into it at all. And other stories where you're going to fight about the fate of the kingdom, it's going to come down to who's your daddy and who are you married to.
Okay. Berta.
I think the story really tells what kind of genre it is, and if it's a mixture of genres. Like, I'm writing a contemporary women's fiction right now. It's about a woman who's rebuilding a hurricane-ravaged resort. There are no werewolves in it, and I really doubt that elves are going to show up in the jungle there. So it's going to be what it is. But I, as a reader, am loving all the mixtures of genres. I love it. It's a mystery in which the heroine has to run against a pack of wolves and try to figure out how they can help her or hinder her in her quest for the solution to the mystery. That's fascinating stuff. And if there's a romance in there, all the better. I love those things. But in my books, there's like pretty linear.
All right, Patricia.
I'm going to tag on to what Berta just said. What the predominant message of your story may be one thing: mystery, science fiction, romance, but there could be little bits of other genres to help round it out. Like I wrote this trilogy that was a contemporary romance, but the backdrop is historical. If you took the historical part out of the story, it's still a romance, but the history, the aspects of the history, made it a little fuller. So I do like to put little bits and pieces of other genres into the story, whether the reader recognizes it as that or not. I think that it helps to broaden the story.
Okay, perfect. So Gail, what advice would you give to a new writer that is struggling with genres, and should they pick one or subgenres? Because, as we know, we've got a handful of main genres that can be broken down into hundreds and hundreds of different options. So what do you suggest for a new writer that's coming into that world and seeing all those options?
Well, two things, and they kind of meet in the middle, because it's going to sound like I'm giving opposites, but I'm really not. The first is, if this is really truly your first shot at writing a whole book, don't worry about it yet. Just write the whole book and see where your heart takes you and see what kind of story you tell organically, and then figure it out. On the other hand, if you do need to understand what the tropes are of a genre so that you satisfy the reader. So romance has to have a happily ever after or a happily for now. Just because people fall in love and have steamy sex in the middle of a story does not make it a romance. It has to have those two elements, has to have a happy ending. So if you haven't bothered to study the tropes and you think, oh, well, most of this is about a love story, it must be a romance, the readers are not going to be very happy. So you have to understand what makes a romance, what makes epic fantasy. That means you have to read a lot of it. And then maybe go back and look at what you wrote and say, what feels, where does this fit now that I know more about the tropes, now that I know more about the genres? And if I mean it to be an epic fantasy, but it doesn't have these things in it, maybe I need to go back and rewrite it to make it fit there. Or if I thought it was a romance, but everybody dies at the end, well, I've got a problem. Maybe it's really something else.
One of Patricia's books.
So, like I said, it sounds like it's giving opposite advice, but they really do meet in the middle. You just have to know what you don't know in order to figure out where you're supposed to be.
And how can they find which tropes are okay to break?
Well, first, figure out how to not break them. And then once you've successfully done that, then people will forgive you for breaking them and think it's very original. But don't set out to rip up the rule book right out of the gate, unless your book just naturally doesn't fit anywhere, at which point you may be inventing a whole new genre, and someday they'll just give you your entire own aisle in Barnes and Noble. But yeah, don't try that first out of the gate.
All right, perfect. Berta.
Well, that was, Gail said it really well. And the things that I tell people, that young adult, if they're writing young adult or children's books, is you have to think about what kind of a book it's going to be. Is it going to be the kind of edgy book that kids are going to hide under the table and not let their parents know they're writing it, that they're reading it, like Crunk, which was a book that my daughter was reading. And I said, what's that book you're reading? I started reading, I was like, oh my goodness, this was on the wrong shelf at Barnes and Noble. I knew it was. But we had some great talks about things like that. It's a
really good book.
It's about drug
It's a
use.
really good book. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the books that my readers want, and it would be a mortal sin for me to kill a dog. Like a dog dies, my reader's going to close the book, throw it across the room, and say, this author is anathema. I'm never going to read anything she writes ever again. On the other hand, if you're writing a cozy mystery and you have somebody decapitated and you write this really gory thing, those readers are going to walk away from you. So you have to know what your readers expect. So what do you want to write? What do you like to read? As a new author, write that, because you know what to expect. You know what you as a reader want to expect. And then if you want to break some rules, break some rules. In romance now, it's nothing weird to see a vampire or a ghost, to have your love interest be a ghost, which raises some interesting questions. And I haven't seen it done very well. That if you're going to write about robots, you better know some mechanical stuff or make it up, or know somebody who knows stuff is going to talk about it in a reasonable way, because people are going to pick it up who know about it, and they're just going to call you out if you get it wrong. So it's write what you know. Stay in the familiar ground until you've got your feet under you, and then you can break out.
All right. Patricia.
Okay, I'm going to be the wet blanket, Jason.
Okay.
Here's my situation. If you want to write a story and you think it crosses a bunch of different genres, which genre would you identify as being the most dominant? Because if you want to be traditionally published, the publisher is going to want to figure out how to market you before they contract you.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, if you want to be independently published, you want to market it, publish it yourself, you still need to know how you're going to market it. So write whatever you want to write. Follow your heart. whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, you're going to, in my opinion, you're going to need to identify the dominant genre so that you can pay your electric bills at the end of the month.
So don't be Douglas Adams, who, what was it, in his Dirk Gently book, it was listed as a horror, ghost, sci-fi, romance, like 20 different genres listed on the back.
When I was younger and starry-eyed and just getting into publishing, and I was like, here's my heart, and the publisher said, you can keep your heart because I need my money.
Yes.
Write whatever you want to write, but at the end of the day, if you want to pay your bills, you need to identify your genre so you can know how best to market it.
Perfect. Gini?
And I'm going to tag on along with what Patricia was saying. Number one, every author has a set number of words they need to write before they stop sucking. And for everyone, it's in the hundreds of thousands. For some of us, it's in the millions. Yeah. But you need to keep writing. If you want to write, writers write. Never give up, never surrender. But understand that talking about writing, talking about your book, talking about all the things you want to do does not write a book. The only thing that writes a book is your butt in the chair, your hands on the keyboard or holding a pen and writing. That's it. So those two things I think really matter. The other thing though, I've got two. Number one, don't write to trends. A lot of people are like, what's hot? Well, what's hot right now? And what's hot 2 years from now, where if your book was ready today, traditionally, you're not on the shelves for 2 more years. Okay, does not matter. I pity the people who today think they're writing the greatest next zombie book because that's fading right now. 5 years from now, it could be back. Who knows? But right now, things go up and down. On the other hand, the people that tell you that vampires are dead, haha, right? Those are editors who are sick of seeing vampires. There's not a reader out there that's sick of vampires. They're like, more vamps. So if you want to write about vampires, by God, do it, because there will always be a market for vampires as near as I can tell. But you also, it doesn't matter what genre you're writing if you've written a good book. If you have a start that captures the reader and makes them turn the pages, a middle that doesn't sag, that comes around to a satisfying conclusion, your genre in that sense doesn't matter. Like I said before, for Touched by an Alien, which is the first book in my Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series, I thought I was writing paranormal romance with a lot of action. And what I discovered, because the publisher said, no, you're writing science fiction with a lot of action, romance, and humor, but it's science fiction because they were aliens and had scientific reasons for it. So the publisher made the decision on, yes, this is a good book, and yes, we're going to go for it. And no, it's not paranormal, silly little writer girl. It is science fiction. And they were right, okay, because that's their job to figure out where you go. But that is their job, to figure out where you go. So if you're going traditionally, your book needs to be coherent. If you've got 50,000 genres and things in there, your book isn't coherent. I don't care if you like it, okay? Of course you like it, you wrote it. Okay, other people have to be able to like it and read it. And that's the same for self-publishing. The greatest thing for authors is that we can self-publish. The worst thing for authors is that we can self-publish, because you can throw things out way before they're ready and basically burn a book that if you'd waited a year or two and really refined your craft, you could have an amazing thing out there. And instead you tossed it out and 6 people bought it and you're disgruntled. So craft is vital. Write all those words. Don't worry about genre until such time as you have finished product to look at and be able to say, I thought that was science fiction, but all I've got are werewolves and vampires. So this is paranormal, and so forth, and go from there. But never give up and never surrender.
So I do thank everyone for coming to watch, but let's go around and have everyone tell us where you can be found on the internet. And I will go ahead and start with you, Berta.
Our books are on Amazon and all of the other booksellers as Jillian Summers for our young adult, and my adult books are Berta Platas, and there's websites are being recreated right now, so I don't know if they're currently up or down, but it's jilliansummers.com and bertaplatas.com. I think it's our web developer keeps saying it's up, it's down, so I have no idea if they're up or down.
All right, perfect. Patricia.
My website is patriciasargeant.com. That's SARGEANT. I use every conceivable letter for sargent.com. And you can find my books on the online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle.
All right.
Thank you.
Gini.
Okay. www.ginikoch.com, and the Alien series and several others are in Barnes & Noble and everywhere books are sold. And you can find all my pen names via my main website. So go to my bibliography page and whomp, there it is. And like Berta, my website's being updated and redone. So while you can still get to it, the bibliography page is behind. I've got it like at least a dozen books that need to go up on it, but we're not bothering because we're doing the new one, but the new one isn't ready. So yeah. So technology can't live with it, can't not live with it. So.
All right. And I know Gail had to drop off already, yes. But we'll have her information along with all of yours at the end of the credits, just so they're up there. And again, I want to thank everyone for coming in and thank everyone for watching. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.